Once again, some instant analysis with our insiders, Chris Johnston and Elliotte Friedman. And gentlemen, the bomb dropped in Buffalo on Tuesday, 97 days after the NHL took its pause, and just 3 weeks after getting the dreaded vote of confidence from owner Kim Pegula. It was the end of the line for Jason Botterill, announced out as GM in Buffalo, replaced by Kevin Adams. Fill us in, Elliotte. Start with you with the scope of what's happening in Buffalo right now.
Well, as we're recording this Zoom call right now, guys, we're getting text that Chris Taylor, the head coach of their American Hockey League team, out with the staff, and they were done really well there in the last couple of years. Ryan Jankowski, who is the director of amateur scouting, and a good chunk of his staff let go. So as we're doing this, even more is beginning to filter in. And, you know, one of the things I'm really hearing, guys, is that a couple of months ago, Kim Pegula did an interview with The Athletic, and Tim Graham, a reporter there. And I'm going to read you a quote that got sent to me by someone. And it said, from Kim Pegula, "We fully admit we put trust in some of the wrong people and made decisions based on information that was given to us by them. It's our fault. We put too much faith in certain people." And somebody sent me that quote and said, watch this. Remember this quote. And basically what he told me was he believed that the Pegulas, the initial people they'd hired to run the Sabres over their first 9 years, I guess they didn't like the processes those people had used, and they felt that they were misled, and that he felt the Pegulas were going to go insular to people who were not necessarily from hockey or people they knew from their organization because they trusted them more. And now look at the powerful people on the hockey side of their organization, Chris. It's Kevin Adams, who's worked with them for a decade, and it's Ralph Kruger, who, although has a hockey background, came from soccer. And this person just texted me today and said, this is no coincidence. This is the Pegulas saying that they don't believe in hockey people, and they're going outside the organization.
Well, and what this signals, Elliotte, is that they're going to be not even less involved, that they're going to be more involved and more hands-on. And I know that there's been some talk in the Buffalo market about the need, maybe to have a president of hockey operations, something to insulate ownership a little bit from the department. This is a move in the other direction. And certainly in Kevin Adams, it's someone that they've gotten to know well, has spent a number of years inside the organization in various roles. And, I think it's going to be a more inclusionary process in terms of how the hockey teams run with both Kevin Adams and Ralph Kruger moving forward.
Well, listen, guys, the Sabres are missing the playoffs for a 9th straight time. That's the active leader in a category you don't want to be the active leader in. So maybe it's not surprising that Jason Botterill is losing his job. What is a bit surprising, at least to me, is the timing of this. Why not do this 97 days ago when the pause started and give Kevin Adams that ramp up to get prepared for the draft, off-season moves, free agent signings, etc.? What do you guys make of the timing of this?
Well, the one thing is that 3 weeks ago, Kim Pegula gave an interview to the Associated Press where she said that Jason Botterill would be remaining as the general manager. And if you look at the history of the Pegulas' ownership, they've fired a lot of people with a lot of term remaining. Tim Murray was fired a year after signing an extension. He's still on the books until the end of this month. Mm-hmm. If you look at football, Rex Ryan was signed early into a long-term contract. And since Jason Botterill had 2 years left, I don't think anybody felt that they wanted to make the change now. Something happened in the last few weeks. And on the Zoom conference call, Kim Pegula said there were differences in opinion. Terry Pegula's quote was, "We felt we weren't being listened to." And Dave and Chris, one of the things that I had heard is that they went through a thorough review. They hired somebody to do a thorough review of their organization, and they believed changes had to be made. I think they felt that Jason Botterill kept a tight circle. They wanted more input on that circle. They wanted some changes made in their decision-making process. And I believe that Jason Botterill, kind of in terms of personnel and budget and the way he wanted to run things, the future of the hockey team, he said no. And I think that forced them to say, we have to change because we don't agree with where this is going, CJ.
Sounds good to me.
Well, we will see what happens. Buffalo, again, looking for some stability. There's been a handful of head coaches, a handful of GMs since the Pegulas took over in 2011. Buffalo will not be one of the 24 teams entering the postseason once there is a resumption of play with the National Hockey League. We're still awaiting what will be the 2 hub cities announced by the National Hockey League. The frontrunner appears to be Las Vegas, but there's always been talk that they'd like to have a Canadian hub city. It seemed that there, CJ, were a lot of logistical hurdles for that to be met. However, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau did, in a news conference, have this to say: we're comfortable with moving forward on an NHL hub in one of the 3 Canadian cities. It will have to be decided by the NHL as well as the cities and provinces and their local health authorities. But however you want to slice it, that is the green light essentially being given by the Prime Minister of Canada. Should we read anything into this? Does this mean we're inching closer to a Canadian hub city?
Well, absolutely it does. I mean, all the hurdles in my eyes have just been removed. And I know that we still don't know exactly what is to become of how this 14-day quarantine for anyone entering the country is going to be handled. But what we do know is that the senior NHL leadership has been in constant dialogue with the federal government. I think that the Canadian government understood that 14-day quarantine specifically was going to prevent a hub city being based in Canada if it remained in place as it's been. And so for the Prime Minister to come out and say this, to me, it's a sign behind the scenes that clearly the door has now been opened for the NHL to award one of these hub cities to a Canadian city. I think Toronto is still the front runner among the 3 possibilities, which include Edmonton and Vancouver as well. And while we don't expect to get firm news on the hub cities this week, David, I think we're more likely to see that next week. This is a big development for the NHL because, as you alluded to there, they've wanted to have a Canadian city involved from the start. I think if as long as the local authorities, specifically in Ontario and Toronto, are comfortable with this, which they seem to be based on the early indications today, I think that the door is open likely for Toronto and Vegas, most likely in the West, to be the 2 cities that the league will focus in on.
I'm good.
All right. Well, things maybe are starting slowly, gentlemen, to get crystallized as we await the return of the National Hockey League. Again, Phase 3 officially set to begin on July 10th, when formal training camps will begin for the 24 teams entering the postseason. Thanks again to our insiders, Chris Johnston and Elliotte Friedman. Thanks for tuning in with this instant analysis.